Chapter 7. While the possible troubles of Maggie's future were occupying her father's mind, Maggie herself was experiencing only the bitterness of the present. The day had begun badly, despite the planned visit to Garum Firs. Happy thoughts of hearing her Uncle Pullet's music box were soon ruined by the arrival of a hairdresser from St. Ogg's, who examined her hair with disgust. If that weren't bad enough, the rest of the house was stressed by preparations for the visit. Mrs. Tulliver made the children dress in their finest clothes, which was not a problem for Lucy and Tom, but made Maggie uncomfortable and surly. The children were permitted to sit and build cart houses until dinner. It was one of the few activities deemed safe for children in fancy clothes. Tom and Lucy were wonderfully clever at building, but nothing Maggie ever constructed could bear the weight of a roof. Tom laughed and called her stupid when her houses fell. "Don't laugh at me, Tom," she said angrily. "I'm not stupid." "Lucy never makes terrible faces like that," said Tom. "I like her better. I wish Lucy was my sister." Maggie got up angrily, upsetting Tom's wonderful house as she did. Tom turned white with anger. He would have struck her if she weren't a girl. He got up and walked away. "Tom," called Maggie after him, "I didn't mean to knock it down." Tom ignored her. Thus Maggie's morning started badly. Tom continued to be cold to her until the excitement of arriving at Garum Firs made him forget his anger. The farmyard life was wonderful there, with all kinds of exotic birds and giant dogs. The gardens and the house itself were large and unusual. Mr. and Mrs. Pullet met them at the front door. Now that they were all together, the children were given cakes and Uncle Pullet was persuaded to play his music box. The music was so beautiful, it made Maggie forget about everything that happened with Tom that morning. She listened quietly with a bright look of happiness. When the music stopped, she jumped up to hug Tom in excitement, but instead knocked over his drink. Maggie's mother and aunt chastised her for being so clumsy and rough. The children were sent outside to play. Mrs. Tulliver wanted to discuss Mrs. Glegg with her sister. "I was so sorry she left the house so angry," she said. "I had no wish to offend her." "Ah, but you never know what Jane might do," said Mrs. Pullet. "She always feels so low. Perhaps she should see a doctor." "Perhaps you are right," said Mrs. Tulliver, "but I'm happy you understand. Sister Dean never takes my side, and you are the only one who can make up with Mr. Tulliver." "Well, he is a difficult man, Bessie," said Mrs. Pullet. "He's never behaved very well toward our family, and the children take after him. The boy is very mischievous, and the girl is rude and brown. It's bad luck, and I'm sorry for you. You were always my favourite sister." "I do try hard for those children," said Mrs. Tulliver, "but Mr. Tulliver doesn't like being told what to do, and I can't put myself into a man's business the way Sister Glegg does. She does more than she should of that. You and I are a lot more alike. We are, Sophie. Perhaps you can go and see Sister Glegg, and persuade her to make up with Mr. Tulliver. It would be very kind of you." "The right thing would be for Mr. Tulliver to go and make up with her himself," said Mrs. Pullet. "I'm not sure I could persuade her to forgive him. She has a terrible temper." "Well, she doesn't have to forgive him," said Mrs. Tulliver. "She just needs to forget about it and not ask for her money back. Mr. Tulliver will forget it as well, and they will become friends again." Mrs. Tulliver was not aware of her husband's determination to pay back Mrs. Glegg's £500. "Well, Bessie, I don't want you to have a hard time, and I don't like it when the family fights, so I will go and do it tomorrow, if Mr. Pullet doesn't mind." Mr. Pullet didn't mind anything to keep Mr. Tulliver from asking him for money. With the matter settled, the three looked forward to their tea. The door soon opened, but instead of tea, the servant brought in an object so startling that